Young. I'm reckon you're see the table. I got little Missy sitting over here in the cat carrier, looking all alert and bored. A little bit longer there, little Missy. A little longer, then you can get out of the room. And you can go out front and try not to get in a fight with the other kitties. Okay, so one of the event roles that came up recently was one of my platinums wants to establish theirself an estate. And so one of the first things I want to do is determine which one of my platinums. Now, your first colony, which is what this sub-chapter in the very back of the blueprint guide is about, which in reality ought to be in the front of the core book, but of the people, the stuff that came with you, you have 6 platinums. So with the colony are 6 platinums who have all contributed to the colonial effort and are here with hopes and dreams of one day founding their own guild. So then it goes also on board or the house lord or lady, blah, 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 i.e. your avatar. So we have an agri platinum, a mining platinum, an industrial platinum, a refining platinum, a housing platinum, and a cartage platinum. So that makes 6 of them. So this is one of the rare times I'll pull a d6 out, and we'll throw a d6, and I roll a 3. So this would be my industrial platinum. And this fella contributed and operates both my Factory A complex and my Colonies Light Foundry. Both are critical to pretty much everything. So this is an important platinum, and it will be the industrial platinum. And so ideally, at some point I would create a bio sheet, an NPC bio sheet for him. It says here that his ranking would be came in at green, which is better than the average. The House Lord, to be honest, that's actually pretty good because it's a base 2000 or 200, 2000, whatever. So from a negotiating standpoint, the house would be at a slight disadvantage negotiating with this individual, which is typical of our platinums in the beginning, but our house leadership will get better in time, and they will get better faster because they do things more frequently than our platinums do. So let's take a gander at what that means for the blueprint itself, right? So there we go. Excuse me. Most platinums, when they complete their first build, will seek to build an estate. This may be done during a negotiation event. Platinums will only build one private estate per world per 10 builds or the equivalent that they control. Guild reps of platinums or imperial status may seek to build a private personal estate once the guild regional office has been completed as a residence. They may seek out a house minister or a house lord and initiate such negotiation. It would not include any of the officers building the additional guild-based builds at the time. So in this case is that, alright, so if one of my platinums completes a build, they approach the house or the house approaches them in any manner, whether it's initiated by you, the player, or initiated by an event, they agree to construct something that's within their purview. So in this case, this fellow agrees to build a heavy foundry or a manufacturing facility B or something like this, and the house agrees to it. So once the factory is complete, the build's functional and operating, at that point the house, the platinum has increased their status and their resources and their wealth considerably, and at that point we can toss a dice, say percentage wise, to see if they want to open a estate or create one. Otherwise, we just wait for the event role that will crop up eventually and introduce it. So that said, this platinum will not try to build another estate unless there's a very special event role that occurs until after they've constructed their 10th build. So by definition, our industrial platinum already has 2 builds on the planet. And so he came with the Factory A complex and the light foundry. So he already has two. If he builds 8 more, he would then decide if he wants to open another estate. At that point, he could open a second estate. It can be on a different world altogether, such as like a retreat, or it could be located in the capital of the planet, as opposed to this one being in the country, etc., etc. You get to kind of get the gist of how that works. So some advantages here. All right. So the house is going to charge the platinum to build this. So the build cost is going to be 10 credits times the build modifier, and Fairwind has a 1.5, so this would be 15 credits for would be the net. The house would earn 15 credits for building this place for the platinum. The platinum will provide all the materials, and they have the advantage of being able to just purchase the materials straight off the exchange at the higher rate. So that's exactly what they would do. You would treat this like a visiting merchant and go ahead and purchase all the stuff. Even if your exchange has a negative, they're just going to pay the higher rate for the stuff, and then the house nets that as a sale. So once that's just the way that goes. Once the estate's complete, the construction part is done and the estate is built, then the estate's going to consume X amount of tonnage of material every cycle, which means this all goes on to the exchange, which the house then has to eat. The house has to maintain that stuff because that's part of the business of having builds. And the exchange for that, the property of the house is allowed at a base of half a credit per cycle. Now, this is important because there's a section for negotiations where the house can actually look upon the land value. So and create additional land value. I will use this as an example. So our platinum, our industrial platinum builds this estate, and the house will determine, we will designate a rolling area of hills just to the south of Fairwind as the district. And so the district will be the home of the industrial platinum. Now he's going to get his 10 acres of land or whatever, and we can go to that subsection and look at that and actually break it down to the hectare and things like this. So we sell by the acreage and hectares and things of that nature. So he gets X amount of, so let's say 10 acres of land or 100 acres of land for his estate. And he's going to pay for it. He's going to cost him 15 credits out the door to have it built. And then it's going to cost him half a credit a cycle indefinitely to maintain it, to operate it and maintain it. So that's tax to the house. And then in lieu of that, the state actually consumes some goods, which then goes against the negatives on the exchange and so on and so forth. The net value is there's also, I think, a tax kickback somewhere on this thing. Let's see, right? So, includes a small village housing 300 thingies on the edge of the estate grounds. So our housing limit currently for Fairwind is set with one housing concern. Max is at 15,000 inhabitants. Even though the house is currently building a second one, we add this little village. Well, now we have 15,300. You see how that works? So now our population growth can increase by another 300. So we've acted, so the estate has its own little supporting village. It might be a couple small cottages in a little cluster. It could be, I don't know, one big honking apartment building where they all live in one building, whatever. It's a matter of how you choose to play it out. This addition to this, it adds a 0.00015 tax modifier to the planet. Support required, land grant purchased or gifted by the house, or land unclaimed and open to homesteading. Dedicated power source. Okay, so this is platinum needs to have this thing fairly close to the chief colony, so that the colony's power grid can power it. or he needs to acquire his own power source. So if an event role crops up the road that a solar panel array shows up or a wind generator shows up, and the house doesn't outright purchase it, I can throw a dice to see if this particular platinum will purchase it for his estate and augment the estate by that additional item, which is like a plug-in thing. So the build is considered a sub-build for construction purposes. Owner is allowed to raise and maintain up to one bodyguard or defender unit. See Op 4 chapter for private security forces. So currently, I'd have to go look at the actual what it says, but I suspect at this current rate that the platinum would, once he has an estate, he's allowed to employ a platoon-size security detachment. Now that could be 7 squads of 5 men apiece, the average being 5 squads of 25 troops to a platoon, but 25 to 35 depending on the type of platoons or the type of squads that he chooses to have, and they would be based on security. So he would, and you think about, well, that's a lot of people. Well, it is and it's not. So if you had a 100-acre complex that you're trying to keep the security of the perimeter secure, you're going to have shifts, obviously, and probably going to have 3, and then you're going to have, however many. Officially, there's a 10-day cycle to the Imperium week, as far as the Imperium's concerned. So you're going to have 3 shifts a day for 10 days in a row. So you're going to need to have those people to split up. The odds are you're not going to have all 5-member squad active. That 5-member squad might be responsible for the first 4 days, or the first 5 days of the week, and the evening, and the next one's for the next 5 days of the week. It's a matter of how you choose to look at it. If you want to go to that depth of information, you're more than willing to do this. But where does this really matter? Well, keep in mind that we have event roles that allow for things like raids, pirate attacks, raids of all sorts that can occur. And the more targets your colony has, the more options for their destinations for those raids to potentially go. Which is why we make the maps we do, because we want to know where the key areas things are. So in this case, I will make a map of Fairwind's capital of the area. So one that's like a couple kilometers or 5 or 10 kilometers by X amount of kilometers across, and then I'll say, okay, so 6 kilometers to the south of the city is the district for the Rolling Hills area of the platinum, so where the industrial platinum has his estate, and that means if I need to send military reinforcements from the capital to their estate, I now have a land movement idea of how long that would take, based on whatever my transportation means are available at the time. This also means that the estate having its own defense on site is maybe what allows it to survive long enough for house reinforcements to show up and save the day. Or it might be the only thing that prevents anything from happening to the estate, because the house forces can't get to their estate fast enough. Right? So that's something to keep in mind. That's part of that private security stuff, and there's a lot of options and possibilities for these things. It's always, to me, it's important to at least have the bare bones notification, so we know he's created an estate. Once it's complete, I'll set up a Op 4 sheet for his defense force, so we have it. At least we know if it's all infantry and what it's equipped with, and most likely it's going to be bare bones stuff, because the house is pretty much bare bones. But it would be nice, and it also gives us a venue. So an event role pops up the road that says this particular platinum we find out he's brought in a load of weapons. Well, perhaps he brought in a load of weapons so he can better equip his defense force. And if he's sufficiently powerful enough or financially wealthy enough, and he feels the need, he can have a bodyguard and other NPCs that are attached to his his entourage that may or may not be affiliated with this security detail. So I mean, you see where there's so many possibilities there. And then from a player's perspective, one of the things that I've always liked to tell players is this: if you're thinking about combat and defense, okay, so let's just say you have a pirate raid, and the pirate raid, the roll comes up and it targets the estate. Well, if your house forces are so far out of position, there's no way for them to respond in a timely manner. Then you have to determine the event took place without you being there, and try to figure out either actually roll the combat out between the existing defense forces and all the stuff that applies to them and the invaders, and see if they were able to beat off the invaders, or if they were wiped out in return, or if there's some kind of stalemate. This might allow you to determine whether or not it's feasible to send a release force. So if I need to send my militia and it has to go by ground, and right now the only thing they got available to them is a bunch of single seat ATVs, well, that don't travel very fast. It might take them, 3 hours or 4 hours to travel. Let's say 2 hours to travel that 6 miles, 3 hours because there's no smooth roads to get there. Well, can the defenders hold off the attackers for 3 hours? The raid's going to happen and be gone in minutes. Well, then there's no point in even calling the militia out at all, because they're not going to have any chance. They won't even get out of the barracks in time. So the defenses of whatever's available at the house, and the platinum defenders may be reduced to just that mere squad of 3 or 4 or 5 people that are working at shift. Because then you might need to determine, is the rest of the defense force available on site at the moment, or do they go home? Do they live in the village? What's their response time? How long would it take for them to exactly? So this also tempers what our op forces are. So you're not going to have a pirate raid that's so overwhelming that none of this matters. So that pirate that's raiding is likely to be a very lightweight pirate warship that's more freighter than warship, and it's going to have a couple squads of goons at best. So you're either going to have some 3 to 5 groups of 5 troopers or goons that are very piss poorly equipped and experienced, versus one squad of medium armored and equipped defenders who also have the advantage of a defensive position. And that goes with a lot of purchases. So we have a lot of specialty purchases, electronics and robotics and things like this, that these people can purchase to augment the security forces that they have available, and make their estates and even more of a defensible location. And this includes prefab bunkers and weapon emplacements. These things can be purchased and then hidden, decorated or worked up to make them look like they're part of the landscape or part of the estate. The more money you want to put into camouflage, the harder it is for you to realize that there's an 8mm assault cannon sticking right behind that hedge right there, beneath that fake concrete, that fake stone-looking wall. It's a matter of how far down that road you want to go. So in this case, we've established that they agreed to a platinum industrial platinum, and he's going to build this estate, and that means they're going to be able to get the house to get a little bit more money every cycle for its taxes. Its needs on the exchange are going to go up just a hair. The house will net a whopping 15 credits when this thing is constructed. Of course, then I have to add it to the build queue. So I look at my build queue on cycle 18 and go, okay, what's available, what's left, and keeping in mind that we also had that private construction company come into town, and that is a platinum owned or neo platinum owned. And now what I mean by neo, there's a section in here that talks about this. These are platinums, the people who are going to be platinums that are not quite there yet. So you could have a sub-build of a factory that only produces a handful of things, so you got a much smaller factory owner who eventually is going to do good or have an opportunity to expand and then become a platinum. So the initial 6 platinums we initially start with, or we start out with, may not be the only platinums, and more platinums. Some will develop on the planet, and some will come and settle the planet. And then platinums in and of themselves is a rank too, because there are several other ranks above that in here about it. Talks, I think. Technocrats and so on and so forth. I don't know exactly where that list is off the top of my head. So anyway, that's how we get the estate, and eventually, hopefully, all 6 of my platinums will establish estates. Now, going back a little bit to the property thing, several items that come into handy is one is this gifting land, or i.e. bribing people. So if you look at negotiations, for example, I'm trying to negotiate with somebody, and let's say I offer them a cut deal on a chunk of property so they could eventually build an estate on it. So I could then determine that the land is worth, I don't know, 15 credits, and that 15 credits, we look at the gift modifier to see what kind of temporary boost that gives our negotiator at the negotiating table. And so we can use this as a tool in some of our negotiations to our advantage. The other thing is, remember, like I said, I'm create a map. I'm going to designate an area, I don't know, of a couple kilometers across, a couple kilometers diameter, a platinums only neighborhood. All right, call it a gated community if you want. I don't care. But we're gonna have the first one's the platinum, industrial platinum. So the next platinum comes along. They're gonna say, I just want to build an estate. I can then say, okay, well, you can build over here, and that 100 acres of land is going to cost you 20 credits. It would only cost 5 credits to, in this case, 5 credits maybe to our industrial platinum. He's going to pay half a credit a cycle indefinitely for his rent, and so will the new guy. So we can negotiate that. We could raise that up. We could say you're going to pay 2 or 3 or 5 credits a cycle. It's a matter of negotiating, and whether or not your platinums are going to willing to do that. And the higher you ask for the money, the worse it's going to be. Well, the opposite goes the other way. So if I offer to give them a nicer and nicer piece of land and it's worth more, then that means the bribe or the gift bonus increases. So it's a desirable thing. So in this case, we get a second platinum and we plant them over there, and they agree to it. I mean, because it's possible that the event roll or some kind in your negotiation might say that they don't want to set one up in that area. Perhaps they want to set one up on the moon, or perhaps they want to set one up on a different planet in the system. And that's all viable, but it changes the dynamics, of course. So in this case, if I get another platinum to settle the district, then the property value is now increased by a remarkable percentage, and there's a set of mechanics in there somewhere for it. So at that point, the land rent goes up, and all my platinums pay more for their monthly payment for renting the land from the house. Even though they technically own the land, they're still renting it from the crown. And then the cost of building the new estate goes up. So let's say it increased by 100%, and originally it was or by a double. So if it was 5 credits for the initial 100 acres for the first guy, it would be 10 credits for the next guy. So the construction cost was 10 credits times the build modifier. Well, that 10 credits, half of it was the cost of the land. So if the next guy would then have to pay 15 credits times 1.5, so we would then get 27.5 credits. And so the third guy comes along, and the fifth guy comes along, and the 10th guy comes along, and then we're tracking it. So we've got X amount of hectares for our maps, and once they're all filled, the place is hideously expensive property at that point, and a house has benefited from it. This also concentrates all your wealth in 1 or 2 areas that makes it easy for something really catastrophic to happen if that were to come down the road. But anyway, you just see the level of accuracy, the details and shit that you can get out of this. Excuse my French. I'm just saying that the level is kind of goofy, I guess. Sometimes I'm wondering in my head, like, why did I go that far? I wanted to make sure we had a formula that could figure land value out, because we have events that allow for, crazy stuff to happen. So I have a guild that comes in, and they're a big one, and they want to build a regional corporate tower in my capital, and the damn thing is going to take up the equivalent of 10 city blocks of real world turf. What's that value? What's that worth? I mean, at the early days when I barely got roads that are worthy roads, and running water still kind of a plan, because we haven't built the waste and water treatment facilities or nothing like that. So you want to build I don't know, more frickin' Trump Tower on the bay. Well, yeah, you'd get it really dirt cheap at that stage of the game, wouldn't you? Because it kind of goes that way. But down the road, how much did that inclusion of that thing jack the value of the property of everything else around it? How much do you benefit from that? So do we need mechanics for shit like that? And apparently at some point I thought I did. And so we do. And it's like being able to, earmark certain areas for certain things like we do in the real world. And then there's other events that kind of tie into stuff like that, right? I mean, you get enough platinums, and there's at least one event where a platinum spouse wants to start some kind of charity organization or or some kind of community social thingamabob or something, and that means the house needs to decide if it wants to support that or not. That's generally how that works. Well, you want to do this. Well, do I want you to do this, and how do I benefit from it as the house? Is it going to cost the house something? I mean, it is what it is. All right, guys. Until next time, I'm Rick. You're not. Have yourself a great January. Let's hope the weather gets better. Get my truck back, freezing cold or not. I'll be out there working, doing as much as I can do. I mean, as long as this 20 below stuff goes on, I won't be working nighttime, and I guarantee it. I don't care how bad somebody's screaming. I'm just not putting myself and the truck at risk. Till next time. It just irritates